He was a commissioned privateer for his government, and he was backed by members of the upper crust of society. He claimed he was forced into piracy when his crew threatened to mutiny.
He was abandoned by his government and backers and found guilty of piracy, murder, and hung twice. And he became one of the most famous pirates in history. This is the true story of Captain Kidd, the unluckiest pirate of them all.
Let's dig into this.
Captain Kidd was born in Dundee, Scotland in 1654. His father was lost at sea when he was young, and little is known about his life until he immigrated to New York City in the 1680s, which was at that time under English control. He was popular and had many friends in society circles, including three governors. By 1689, he was a member of the French and English pirate crew of Captain Jean Fanton in the Caribbean, and his life started to get pretty interesting.
During one voyage, Kidd and other members of the crew mutinied. Leaving their captain behind, they took the ship and sailed to the British colony of Nevis, a tiny 36-square-mile island in the Caribbean. Governor Christopher Codrington welcomed the mutineers with open arms. The ship was made part of Codrington's fleet and renamed the Blessed William, and William Kidd was named captain. The Blessed William was ordered to protect English ships in the Caribbean and along the east coast of America from pirates.
By 1690, Kidd had made New York City his base, buying property and sailing from ports nearby. In 1691, he married Sarah Bradley Cox Ort, a twice widowed woman almost half his age. Sarah happened to be very rich thanks to her previous husbands, and Kidd was extremely successful himself. So successful that English government offered him a commission as a privateer in 1695. His mission was to protect ships of the East India Company in the Indian Ocean as captain of the ship the Adventure Galley. It was a lucky commission, but his luck was about to change.
Privateering had been practiced since the 13th century and can be thought of as kind of a private navy of independently owned ships. Kings and queens gave the ships authority to sail on missions for the governments, usually to find and capture pirate ships and their cargo for the crown. The captain of the ship and crew would receive some of the spoils, and many became very wealthy privateering. Of course, it was a dangerous profession. Capturing ships wasn't easy, and battles could be quite brutal. Crews of the privateering ships were often rough men, many criminals, and not necessarily rule followers. Governments usually looked the other way when laws were broken, but to Captain Kidd's surprise, all of this would change while he was at sea.
The only luck Kidd had from the moment he started in his travels on the Adventure Galley seemed to be bad. In May of 1696, he and his crew sailed from Deptford, England, down the Thames River, and immediately got into trouble. When a Royal Navy ship passed a private ship, you were supposed to salute. When a Royal Navy ship passed on the Thames, the drunk sailors on the Adventure Galley didn't. The Navy ship fired a shot to remind the crew to show respect. Instead, some reports say many of the crew dropped their trousers and mooned the Navy ship, slapping their rear ends for good measure. The Royal Navy immediately stopped the Adventure Galley and took many of the crew, forcing them into service for the Navy as punishment.
Kidd sailed to New York City to find enough crew to man his ship there. Unfortunately for Kidd, he had to take what he could get, and the new crew was as rowdy as the old one, filled with criminals and pirates. They left New York for a stop at Cape Town, Africa, already way behind schedule. Before they got there, the ship's sails were damaged. Kidd stopped a Royal Navy vessel and demanded new sails to complete his mission. The Royal Navy said no. Kidd threatened to attack the first English ship he found and take its sails. The Navy responded by taking more of his crew into service and threatened to charge Kidd with treason. The adventure galley was able to slip away at night and avoided Cape Town, heading for the east coast of Africa for badly needed supplies, and another bit of bad luck.
In February of 1697, the Adventure Galley was resupplying and had high hopes of getting back on schedule when her crew started getting sick. By the time the ship left port, 50 men had died, leaving the ship short-handed again. There were other problems too. The ship badly needed repairs and was leaking. They had not found ships full of treasures to make them all rich. They hadn't found much of anything but trouble. Tempers grew short, and the crew started to talk about mutiny. William Moore, a gunner on the ship, threatened Kidd. Kidd hit him over the head with a bucket. Moore died the next day, and the Adventure Galley went on.
Early the next year, they found the Quetta Merchant, some people call it the KIDD Merchant, off the tip of India. The huge ship was filled with a cargo from Persia, said to be worth a fortune, including gold, silk, spices, opium, and sugar. It was licensed by France, making it a legitimate target for privateering under Kidd's English commission. Despite the adventure galley's smaller size and smaller crew, they managed to capture the ship and sailed off towards Hispaniola, abandoning the adventure galley.
What Kidd and his crew didn't know was that the cargo they had taken and the ship itself were actually owned by powerful people from the British East India Company. The Adventure Galley had been commissioned to protect these ships. And not only that, some of the cargo was owned by high government officials from India. Not good people to cross.
In April of 1699, when they reached Hispaniola, Kidd and the crew were surprised to find they had been accused of piracy. Knowing his powerful backers in New York could help him prove his innocence, he headed there on a smaller ship, ordering some of his crew to stay behind, bury the treasure from the KIDD, and then burn the ship.
When he reached New York, Kidd found he had more of a problem than he had thought. He had not met his schedule, he had not found vast treasure to pay his financial backers, and he had reportedly missed out on several ships he should have captured. Plus, the Royal Navy had reported their incidences with the Adventure Galley and thought the crew were pirates themselves. Worst of all, Kidd privateering itself was no longer considered to be a legitimate business, and some of his financial backers had also backed the Quetta, so he had in fact stolen from them. Kidd was in big trouble.
Luckily, Kidd had the licenses from the KIDD, which would prove it was a French ship and a legitimate target. He turned them over to British Governor of New York, the Earl of Belmont. They promptly disappeared. A warrant for Kidd's arrest was issued. Kidd managed to avoid arrest until June of 1699, and Belmont finally sent him a message promising leniency if he would come to Boston. Kidd agreed and arrived July 3rd, only to be told he had to provide a written account of his travels by July 6th. He missed the deadline. Belmont ordered his immediate arrest. Kidd tried to bribe his way out of jail by revealing the location of buried treasure, and some was actually recovered. But Kidd was sent to England and prison in 1700.
He would spend a year in prison before he went to trial in early of May of 1701. He was accused of the murder of William Moore, the Adventure Galley crew member that had threatened mutiny. Many believe the verdict was set before the trial even began. Kidd was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging.
Then he was tried for multiple acts of piracy. He expected his powerful friends and financial backers to come to his defense, but they did not. He expected the licenses from the French ship to prove it was a legitimate target, but the licenses could not be found. He insisted he was innocent, but it did no good. He was found guilty again.
On the afternoon of May 23rd, 1701, Captain William Kidd was hung on Execution Dock along the bank of the Thames River, where much of his trouble began. And yet another bit of bad luck. The rope snapped, and poor Kidd fell to the ground. A new noose was placed around his neck, and he was hoisted back up and hung a second time. This time the rope held. His body was placed in a gibbet on the shore as a warning for other pirates.
Almost immediately, Kidd became famous as a pirate, and he has remained one of the best-known pirates to this day. But he wasn't like the swashbuckling, flamboyant pirates we know and love. He was no Blackbeard or Jack Sparrow, just a captain with very bad luck. Believe it or not, the French licenses proving Kidd's version of events and his innocence were found in a British government building 300 years after his trial. And the Quedda Merchant, the ship that brought Kidd down, was found in 2007 off the coast of the Dominican Republic in water only 10 feet deep. But most of the legendary treasure of Captain Kidd has never been found.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video,
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
and we'll see you on the next one.